welcome to the Shale Gas and Fracking Energy Evolution or Revolution speaker event. We're excited to have you all here today. These topics in particular have been very prevalent in the energy industry as of the past decade, and they've generated quite a bit of controversy. That's one of the main reasons why we've chosen to have a speaker series event today, in order to improve energy literacy. This event is being hosted by the Ivey Business Review and is being sponsored by the Ivey Energy Policy and Management Center. The goal of the Ivey Business Review is twofold: to provide students with a chance to voice their opinions on complex business issues before being constrained and molded by the corporate world, while also allowing students the opportunity to learn from those complex business issues. The speaker series stems from the second part of our goal, which allows you as students to get the opportunity to talk with industry leaders about current dynamics in their industry. So without further ado, let me introduce our two speakers. First up, Steve Baker is the president of Union Gas. If you live in Eastern Ontario and have gas heating, the likelihood is it's a high possibility that the company provides it. Steve graduated from the University of Waterloo with a Bachelor of Arts and got his Master's of Accounting in the same school in 1987. He joined Union Gas in 1989 and has since held a number of executive positions in business development, storage and transmission, regulatory, and marketing. Prior to his current role, he served as the Vice President and Treasurer of Spectra Energy Corp. Both speakers bring a wealth of knowledge to this speaker series and this event, and they are well respected in their fields. We appreciate the time that they've taken for us today to educate us on natural gas and fracking. And without further ado, let's give them a more active welcome, and welcome our speakers, Steve Baker and Mel Yedros.
Well, thanks, Nick, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and join you today. Nick mentioned the Ivey Energy Policy and Management Committee. Union Gas actually joined that as a member last year, and I think part of joining that, part of that forum is really to have discussions like this in terms of what's going on in the energy sector. I hear a lot in the press what's really going on, and it gives us a chance to have some dialogue on the issue. So it's a pleasure to be here today. When Guy Holborn and Nick and I were talking about this session, mentioned that there was a lot of interest in hydraulic fracturing and shale gas. And as we started talking about the session here today, we thought instead of just jumping right into that, it might be worthwhile to have just a bit of a context setting over top of that in terms of what's really going on in the energy sector these days, and really around energy literacy or lack thereof, and how that's sort of shaping the policy environment that we find ourselves in. So I'm going to try to do a bit of a setup in terms of some of the things I see out there around energy and energy literacy. And then Mel's going to talk about shale gas and hydraulic fracturing, something that he spent a lot of time on in his role through the International Gas Union. So I think you'll get a perspective, not just what's going on in Canada and North America on shale gas. I think he's got a very good view in terms of shale gas resources and development throughout the world. I'd say at the outset that I think from an overall perspective, I think we're having a pretty unbalanced dialogue at times around energy. And I just think a lot of the times we don't really realize how many things in our daily lives today come from hydrocarbon and fossil fuels. And so I'm going to provide a bit of a context just in terms of some of the things you might not think about that actually come from energy. But the dialogue that we're having these days is oftentimes very polarized. You get very polarized views in terms of environment and climate and energy. It can often be confusing to sort of wade through, what's fact and what's fiction. I'll try to do a bit of that today. But I think one of the concerns about the fact that we have, in my view, a fairly low level of energy literacy in this country is that there's, as you are aware, there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of policy issues that are going on right now. And I think if you overlay that with, as I said, fairly low levels of literacy, you got to question whether you're going to get the right policy at the right time. One of the things I wanted to do at the start, and something that's obvious, that's sometimes lost in the whole energy dialogue, is what does it mean to people? What does it mean to individuals to have access to energy? So I'm going to ask Nick to play a video, and this is about a community, not in some far-off place. It's a community in northern Ontario, northwest of Thunder Bay, a town called Red Lake. And we brought natural gas to this community a couple of years ago, and prior to that time, they didn't have access to natural gas. So I'm going to ask him to play the video just so you can get a bit of a context in terms of what it means to people in our community to get access when they haven't had it previously.
Red Lake is a beautiful place. Let me start there. I'm beaming when I think of the natural beauty of Red Lake. Where else can you look out your window or your backyard and have a natural playground? Winter in Red Lake is typical Northern Ontario.
For a month, you'll have minus 25 to minus 30. The cost of winter is absolutely a very important aspect of living in Red Lake.
Natural gas is, the benefits are many. You know, clean, efficient energy, the impact on the environment, let alone the cost savings.
We switched over in the middle of January, so my first full month's bill was the month of February. It was about a savings of $500 that month.
The month of January of 2013 the bill was $6,500, just the month of January. Last year was $1,200 with natural gas. This is a place of pride for the community because there's so much of the identity. We definitely want to preserve it. It's going to mean that this institution can continue.
Obviously, natural gas, when it certainly comes to home heating, is a game changer.
People will use those savings to just improve their quality of life, and it might be a winter vacation for them, which they could probably never do before.
The extra money that I'm saving gives me an opportunity to, obviously, to spend it somewhere else. Now I can put the pool, and I can heat the pool, too. I expect that'll get the grandkids over more, I guess.
We want to see people bring their family here and stay here and participate.
I don't think the benefits of natural gas haven't all been realized yet, and they will be. Look out, Red Lake is just starting to move.
So I thought I'd play that just to start that video, just really to try to put a face on energy. And it's something that I think gets lost a lot in the dialogue that we have these days, particularly for areas like down here. Like if you take London, Union Gas has been supplying and distributing natural gas in this community for over 100 years. You compare it to, there are still a lot of places in Ontario that don't have access to natural gas, and I think you heard some of the commentary there in terms of what it means to have that when they've not had that before. So one of the questions I thought I would ask you to think about here is, when you hear the word energy, just think to yourselves, what is it that comes to mind? What are the first things that pop in your mind? And I asked my kids this question, and a couple of their friends. I said, when you hear energy, you know, what is it that you think about? What is it that comes to your mind? So you can flip to the next slide. What you typically hear is you know, gasoline, diesel fuel to fuel vehicles on the highway. You hear about, you know, fuel to, you know, fuel factories, to run factories. You hear about, at least for my kids, you'll hear about natural gas to heat your home. If I didn't hear that one from my own kids, I know I'd really be in trouble. But that's what you typically hear, and I think that's, you know, that's just what typically comes to mind for most people. But I'd ask you to think about another question. So when you got up this morning, you know, did you have you know, orange juice or some sort of a juice out of a plastic container? Did you have milk out of a plastic milk bag? I'm sure all of you grabbed your cell phone, you grabbed your laptop or your tablets, And what a lot of people don't think about a lot of the times is that all those products, and a lot of the components in those products are derived from hydrocarbons and fossil fuels. It's just not something that we think about. It's not something that we talk about. We've always had access to it all of our lives. If you go to the next one, if you really think a little bit deeper and do some research, you'll find out that hydrocarbons are used in a lot of the things, as I said, that we use every day and we take for granted that they're there. So things like plastics, things like clothing, asphalt, rubber, electronics. Just think on the issue of plastics, how many things, if you look in your apartment or your house or your vehicle, look at how many components in your house or your vehicle are made out of plastic. And all plastics are driven from hydrocarbons, from the petrochemical sector in terms of refining oil or natural gas liquids into products that produce plastic. Again, you think of everything that's made of that, diapers, PVC piping, garbage bags, Ziploc bags. Again, all those things that have been around all of our lives that we take for granted have their origin and come from hydrocarbons. So I think it's just important to sort of set that stage and remind ourselves that, because the energy sector is a lot broader than just vehicle fuel or home heating fuel or fuel to fuel factory. So where's the dialogue today on energy? I think a lot of it is it's really an issue of almost feels like hydrocarbons versus the environment. To the extent that you raise, if there's any kind of support for hydrocarbons these days, a lot of times you're labeled almost as anti-environmental, even though, as I tried to point out, there's a lot of things that we use in our daily lives that come from hydrocarbons. And that's not to say, I don't want to leave the impression that I don't think, the environment and climate change and those issues are important. They are. But it just feels like, especially today, that's a very imbalanced or unbalanced discussion. It gets very polarized, and it's either you're for the environment or you're for energy. There doesn't seem to be, any kind of a middle ground discussion, despite our attempts to do that. If you look at energy, I think any form of energy, doesn't matter what it is, there's going to have some environmental impact. Doesn't matter whether you're looking at solar, whether you're looking at wind, renewable energy, you're going to have environmental impact. And one of the things I can say is that every energy company, doesn't matter what it is, whether you're an oil company, coal, natural gas in our case, we spend a lot of time on the environment, we spend a lot of time on sustainability. In the case of Union Gas, I can tell you that for the last probably 15 or 20 years, we've spent a significant amount of time and effort on programs that we call demand-side management, conservation programs, efficiency programs, where we're actively out there trying to get our customers to use less gas. That wasn't the case when I first started with the company 25 years ago, but I wasn't with the company very long, and we started to really move down that spectrum where we really needed to look at more efficient ways to use our fuel and to help our customers save money and use less. And that's something that I think in various forms you'll see every energy company doing. Again, you don't hear about it a lot, but it's going on everywhere. So I think if there was any message that I would leave you with today, it's really that, in my view, it's not all that helpful to frame an argument around hydrocarbons versus the environment. We really need to find a way to sort of change it around and talk about hydrocarbons or fossil fuels and the environment. I think that's where you're going to have a better discussion. I think that's where you're going to have a more balanced discussion. But it isn't happening today for a number of reasons, as we said. So if you look at this picture, clearly everybody knows what it is, wind turbines. We've seen a lot of wind generation built in the province as the province has moved off coal-fired generation. Particularly down in this area in southwestern Ontario, we've got a lot of them. So again, take a look at it. Think what are the first things that come into your mind when you see a wind turbine? And again, I ask my kids this question, some of their friends. What do you see? What comes into your mind when you see a wind turbine? I hear things like green energy, clean energy. A lot of them say it's free. The wind is free, it's zero cost energy. Some of them say they're majestic looking. So, a lot of different terminology there. But I'd ask you to look a little bit deeper at a wind turbine in terms of what you see. And I tell you what I see is I see a lot of components like steel and a lot of other components that come directly from hydrocarbon and fossil fuels, either directly or indirectly, in order to make a wind turbine. And if you just think of the amount of steel that's in a wind turbine, just think of sort of the life cycle of steel production. Start with mining. I can guarantee you that the machinery that is mining iron ore driven by gasoline or diesel. Then you look at the process of smelting the ore to extract the iron from it. You know, a lot of energy, a lot of heat, a lot of very reliable and steady heat. It's typically been coal, a lot more natural gas these days. And then you look at the refining of the steel into a product that we can use on our vehicles, appliances, whatever. Again, it takes a lot of energy in order to roll that steel and to ultimately make it into a product like a wind turbine. So a lot of energy that's in there. Again, I don't think a lot of people think about that when they look at something like a wind turbine in terms of what's gone into it. But like many things, there's a lot more to the story. Another perspective on wind, I would tell you, in Ontario is that as Ontario's built a lot more renewable generation, wind or solar, it's had a big impact on our business as a natural gas company. So at times when the wind is not blowing or the sun's not shining, you need a backup source of power. And in the province of Ontario today, that backup or that swing power is really natural gas. If you look at wind, the average utilization factor of a wind turbine in the province is around 20%, give or take, whatever, depending on the year that you're in. So you think about that, the other 80% of the time, you need some sort of a backup fuel in order to back up that form of generation. Not saying it's bad, not saying it's good, it's just a fact that you need it. And again, a lot of that dialogue around renewables oftentimes gets lost or is not understood by the public when they say, why are we building a gas-fired power plant? So on one hand, they might want renewables, but they don't want a gas-fired power plant. But as you see here today, you need both. And the reason you need both is that as we sit here today, we don't have, large-scale commercial energy storage. So when the wind's blowing and we don't need the power, today we can't store it and use it, a day later, 24 hours later, whatever. I think technology, they're working on it, and I think, I'm a believer in technology, and I think one day we will get there, the technology will be there. But as it sits here today, it doesn't. So again, a lot of the things you might hear many times is that we should just totally get off fossil fuel hydrocarbons and go to renewable energy. I think the reality is we can't do that today. We do not have the technology that would allow that to happen and still have us have the access to energy that we've all grown accustomed to in our lives as we sit here today. So, it really hit home for me the other day. I'm driving to the airport last Friday. Remember last Friday, it was screaming cold, minus 30 degrees Celsius on my car thermometer. I'm driving from Chatham to the Detroit airport about 5:30 in the morning, and it's obviously dark, so there's no solar energy. It was a calm day as I'm driving past the turbines on the highway. They aren't spinning at all. And I know that our system was pushing out pretty well the maximum amount of gas that we could, not just to heat homes, but to also push gas to gas-fired power plants to basically provide the energy that we weren't getting from renewables, just based on the weather conditions and the fact that it was dark that day in the morning. So again, a part of energy that's often not thought of a lot of the times. So why does the discussion feel unbalanced? I think a lot of it is that there's not a lot of other supporters or dialogue around fossil fuels and hydrocarbons, absent the energy companies that are in it. But I came across a couple books that I thought I'd highlight for you. If you're looking for some extra light reading. The one is it's called Smaller, Faster, Lighter, Denser, Cheaper. It's by Robert Bryce. And he talks a lot about energy in a global context, sort of how much energy it takes to sort of allow the world to function. And some of the practical difficulties of making a statement that we're just going to get rid of fossil fuels and hydrocarbons tomorrow and go to all renewables. So he provides, I think, a pretty good dialogue and just some things to think about in terms of how we go forward as a society and a continent in terms of energy use. The other one I read this past Christmas by Alex Epstein is called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. A little bit different than a prior book, but talks a lot about just what fossil fuels and hydrocarbons have meant to society, not just here in North America, but all around the world. He talks about things like the correlation between energy and reductions in poverty, correlation between energy and an increase of life expectancy in a lot of countries that don't have the kind of access to energy that we have here in Canada and in North America. So again, you'll read the book and you won't agree with everything that's in it, and I don't think that's the point, but I think if you read it, you'll get, I think, a much different perspective and a broader perspective in terms of some of the issues that are out there as we go forward in the context of energy discussions in the future. Go to the next one. So how do we restore the balance? I think one of the reasons we're here today is a big part of it, I think, is around the education system. And again, quick story about my boys. I've got 3 boys. One in university, one in secondary school, one in elementary school. When I look at their curriculum, they've all taken geography. They've all taken courses on the environment and climate change. I think to a T, they've not taken really anything on energy. So if you go back to the comments that I made at the start in terms of just where does everything come from that we use in our daily lives? Like, as I said, plastics, fertilizer, all those kind of things. Really not a lot of discussion in the school system about that. So I think that's part of the issue why we find ourselves today in a position where at times it feels like a bit of an unbalanced dialogue that we're having. And I only have jokingly feel like saying to my kids, when your teacher's up there, with a lesson writing on a smartboard, might be a good question to say, where does the material come from for that smartboard? And again, it's largely plastics. It's largely things that have their derivation from hydrocarbons in the petrochemical sector. But again, I don't think we spend a lot of time thinking about that. So anyway, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to turn it over to Mel. But the last comment I would make is, again, it's been a pleasure to be here with you. And I think why it's important to have these kind of dialogues is that every one of you in this room, your colleagues and friends that aren't here, you are going to be the future leaders of this, not just this province, this country. And I guarantee that as you go forward in your careers, no matter where you're working or what field you're in, I think you're going to come across issues related to energy and related to energy policy. And if there's any message I can leave you with, it's continue to broaden your knowledge, ask questions, get educated on what energy is and what energy isn't, so that we can have a good dialogue on energy and energy policy going forward. So thanks. Look forward to your questions later on, and I'll turn it over to Mel.